The story of Mike Tyson does not begin under bright lights or in roaring arenas. It begins in the cracks between broken floorboards, in the quiet corners of a childhood shaped by poverty, fear, and a longing so deep it followed him like a shadow for the rest of his life. Before he became the most terrifying force in modern sports, before the world learned to say his name with awe and tremor, he was simply Michael Gerard Tyson, born on June 30, 1966, in Fort Greene Hospital, Brooklyn. The world he opened his eyes to was already fractured. His biological father, Purcell Tyson, vanished so completely that Mike later said he had no memory of the man at all. For a fleeting moment, another man, Jimmy Kirkpatrick, took the role of father, but he too disappeared before Mike was old enough to understand what abandonment even meant. And so the boy was left in the care of his mother, Lorna Tyson, a woman carrying the weight of 3 children and a lifetime of disappointment on her tired shoulders. The family drifted through half-empty apartments in neighborhoods where the walls were thin, but the hunger was thick. Each move felt like walking deeper into a storm. By the time they reached Brownsville, one of New York's most unforgiving neighborhoods, hope itself felt like a visitor who rarely stayed. Inside their cold apartment, with peeling paint and a refrigerator that often held nothing but leftover air, Mike learned what it meant to go without. His oversized glasses, shy posture, and gentle lisp made him an easy target for the kids who ruled the sidewalks. They shoved him, mocked him, called him names he carried like bruises on the inside. "People looked right through me," he later confessed. That sense of invisibility shaped him long before he ever shaped a punch. When humiliation became too heavy to carry, the rooftop became his escape. Amid the thrum of the city far below, he found something fragile and pure: pigeons. Soft creatures he fed with crumbs from school lunches, creatures he whispered to, as though they could absorb the secrets he couldn't tell a single human being. "They were the first things I ever loved," Tyson said, and he meant it. But childhood tenderness is often at the mercy of cruelty. One afternoon, everything shattered. A neighborhood boy grabbed Mike's favorite pigeon, crushed it, and left it lifeless on the ground. The world did not pause. No one gasped. But to Mike, something broke. Something deep. Something that had been trembling silently for years. The fire that would one day fuel the world's most explosive fighter flickered awake in that moment. Not born of fury alone, but from heartbreak, shame, and the bitter taste of helplessness. He swore a vow that day: never again would he allow anyone to make him feel powerless. To fill the void, he drifted toward older boys who ran with the local crew known as the Jolly Stompers. They weren't a family, but they felt close enough for a kid who had never had one. Running errands turned to petty thefts. Petty thefts grew into detentions. And by the time he was 13, Tyson had been arrested nearly 40 times. Not because he was cruel, but because the streets had become the only classroom he knew. When things grew too loud, too threatening, too cold, he slipped into abandoned buildings, hollow structures with shattered windows and graffiti-scarred walls. In those empty rooms, he swung fists at the air with a raw urgency, as if fighting shadows he couldn't outrun. Every punch echoed with the same vow: "I will never be humiliated again." But in 1978, a wrong step changed everything. After snatching a woman's purse, a desperate act driven by hunger more than malice, he was sent to the Tryon School for Boys in upstate New York. If Brownsville was harsh, Tryon was its colder, quieter cousin. Long, sterile hallways, metal beds that groaned every night, the suffocating silence of boys the world had already given up on. Yet the deepest wound in that place wasn't the discipline, it was the visitor's room. For 9 long months, Mike took the seat closest to the door, waiting for his mother to walk in, smiling, arms open. She never came. "I thought nobody cared," he admitted later, the words still carrying the ache of a boy waiting for a door that stayed closed. But fate, unpredictable and often late, finally intervened. One afternoon, a counselor named Bobby Stewart, a former boxer, watched Tyson hammer a heavy bag with a ferocity far beyond his age. Stewart didn't see a delinquent, he saw a storm, a wounded animal desperate for a place to rest, a spark worth saving. That moment became the first true turning point of Tyson's life. Stewart trained him, pushed him, tested him, then took him somewhere that would change the entire trajectory of boxing history, the Catskill Boxing Club. Inside that dim, dusty gym stood an aging trainer named Cus D'Amato, a man whose own life was carved by heartbreak and whose eyes had a gift for recognizing destiny long before the world did. Cus studied the boy in silence, his mind turning gears. Then he spoke the impossible. "I believe you can be the youngest heavyweight champion in the world." The word struck Tyson with the impact of a knockout punch. No one had ever believed in him. No one had ever told him he could be anything other than trouble. And in that quiet gym, surrounded by sweat-stained mats and flickering light bulbs, Mike Tyson felt something new, something terrifying, the weight of being seen. From that moment forward, Mike's life shifted with ferocity. Cus didn't just train him, he took him into his home, fed him at his dinner table, let him sleep under a roof where a hallway light stayed on at night just so he wouldn't feel alone. For the first time in his life, Mike belonged somewhere. But belonging came with a price. Cus demanded discipline that bordered on merciless. 4 a.m. runs through freezing Catskill mornings that carved ice into Tyson's lungs. 1,000-rep workouts that pushed his muscles to their limits. Neck exercises that made his head nearly unbreakable. Sparring sessions with grown men whose punches thudded like sledgehammers. Many nights he crawled into bed certain he wouldn't be able to move the next day. But that pain, for the first time, didn't humiliate him. It transformed him. And in the quiet moments, Cus taught him not just how to fight, but how to think. "The hero and the coward feel the same fear," Cus whispered. "It's what you do with it that matters." Those lessons, spoken softly in a small gym on a hill, built the spine of Iron Mike. But every ascent takes something from you. In 1982, when Tyson was just 16, his mother died. Though their relationship was complicated, her death carved a permanent hollow inside him. "My mother never saw me become anything," he said, a confession shaped by grief, not guilt. Into that empty space stepped Cus D'Amato, who became Tyson's legal guardian. For the first time in his life, someone chose him, not out of obligation, but out of belief. And in that belief, the greatest fighting machine the world had ever known began to take shape. By the time Mike Tyson stepped into the ring as a professional on March 6, 1985, he was carrying more than gloves. He carried Cus's prophecy, the weight of every abandoned apartment, every mocking voice, every heartbreak, every bruise, every moment that taught him to survive alone. His debut opponent, Hector Mercedes, hit the canvas in under 2 minutes. It wasn't just a victory, it was a warning, a message sent to the boxing world. A storm had arrived. That year, Tyson fought an astonishing 15 times, winning every match by knockout. Some fighters spent years climbing the ranks. Tyson detonated through them, a force the sport was unprepared to contain. In lonely hotel rooms after each win, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, unsure whether he was racing toward his destiny or running from the ghosts of his past. "I was scared every fight," he later admitted, "scared of failing him." Him, always meaning Cuss. 1986 was the year the world met Iron Mike Tyson. He demolished Marvis Frazier in 30 seconds. He tore through opponents so quickly that broadcasters barely had time to settle into commentary. The money grew, the headlines grew faster, and with every punch thrown, he carried the memory of the man who shaped him. But the road to greatness is paved with trials, not trophies. The fight against Jesse Ferguson ended early after a clash of heads, leaving Tyson pacing the ring, furious at being denied the knockout he craved. Against James Bone Crusher Smith, he fought through 11 exhausting rounds, tangled in clinches, a test of patience instead of power. Yet through every frustration, he marched forward, driven by loyalty to a man who was no longer there. On November 22, 1986, at just 20 years old, Mike Tyson defeated Trevor Berbick to become the youngest heavyweight champion in history. Berbick staggered across the ring, collapsing under Tyson's onslaught as though gravity itself had turned against him. A $2 million purse meant nothing. The roar of the arena only made the emptiness louder. Cus D'Amato wasn't there. But destiny waited for no one. In 1987, Tyson unified the WBC and WBA titles, dismantling Pinklin Thomas with a ferocity that left commentators stunned. Then came the grueling 12-round war with Tony Tucker, a battle that pushed Tyson to his limits. For the first time in years, someone refused to fall. And still, Tyson endured, winning a unanimous decision. At 21, he stood as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, the first since Muhammad Ali. Arena lights dimmed when he walked, opponents wilted under his stare. He became not just a fighter, but a phenomenon. And everything, every victory, every headline, built toward a single night. June 27, 1988, Tyson versus Michael Spinks, the showdown of the decade. The fight generated over $21 million in pay-per-view buys. Tyson earned a record-breaking $22 million for the night. Celebrities filled every seat. The atmosphere pulsed with anticipation. Tyson walked through the tunnel with the calm of a man carved from destiny. No robe, no theatrics, only purpose. When the bell rang, he moved like a force of nature, precise, explosive, terrifying. Seconds in, the first clean shot cracked through the air. Moments later, a final combination sent Spinks collapsing to the canvas. 91 seconds. That was all. History didn't bend that night. It broke. It erupted. It crowned a king. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Commentators shouted over one another. Fans clung to each other in disbelief. And at the center of it all stood Tyson, belts gleaming, chest heaving, while a quieter truth swirled beneath the triumph. "I just wished he could have seen it," he said years later. For all the glory, all the noise, all the wealth, the moment belonged to a boy who once stood alone on a rooftop, whispering secrets to birds because no one else would listen. But even at the highest peak of the mountain, where the lights burn brightest, the shadows wait. And sometimes they stretch farther than even the strongest among us can see. The fall begins. Tyson's shadow appeared when he was 19 years old, long before the world ever noticed. Cus D'Amato died in November 1985, taking with him the moral compass that guided Tyson's mind more than Tyson ever understood. Tyson kept winning, but the steering wheel was gone. 3 years later, the second blow came. Jimmy Jacobs, Tyson's brilliant, gentle manager, and the final protector of Cuss's principles, died after a long battle with leukemia. Quote, "When Jimmy died, the lights went out for the second time," unquote, Tyson said. Soon after, Kevin Rooney, the last guardian of the Catskill discipline, was pushed out. Into that vacuum stepped Don King, and what walked in behind him was chaos. With the protectors gone, Tyson drifted. Training shrank. Nights stretched into parties and temptations. The gym, once sacred, lost its gravity. The people around him multiplied, but none cared enough to give truth. Only flattery. Only indulgence. Only noise. I was a kid with too much power and nobody to tell me no. The cracks widened. Street altercations made headlines. The infamous fight with Mitch Green left Tyson with a fractured hand. Police sirens echoed at his home. His young marriage to Robin Givens collapsed under emotional storms and public spectacle. The fall had begun. By the late 1980s, Mike Tyson stood at the peak of the sports world, a young king wrapped in the illusion of invincibility. But behind the highlight reels and roaring crowds, his world was cracking. The discipline Cus D'Amato had built inside him began to fade. The structure that had once protected him now dissolved under fame, money, and the wrong people whispering in his ear. Training shortened, parties stretched into mornings, and the loneliness he had carried since childhood returned, heavier than ever. "I didn't know who to trust," he later admitted, surrounded by people who smiled at him but loved only what they could take from him. The unraveling was slow at first, but when it broke completely. The night everything changed came on February 11, 1990, in Tokyo. Buster Douglas was never supposed to win. He wasn't supposed to last more than a round. Commentators treated the fight like a formality, another easy victory for the unstoppable Iron Mike. But Douglas entered the ring fighting for something larger than the sport. His mother, who had died just weeks before. Tyson entered the ring exhausted, unfocused, and spiritually empty. When the bell rang, the world witnessed something impossible. Douglas jabbed with accuracy, confidence, and heartbreak, fueling every punch. Tyson blinked in confusion. He chased shadows he couldn't catch. And in the 10th round, an uppercut sent him crashing to the canvas, reaching blindly for his lost mouthpiece. The referee counted. The myth collapsed. For the first time, Tyson was not the monster, he was the fallen man. The world didn't just watch him lose a fight, it watched him lose the armor he had spent a lifetime building. 2 years later, his life took an even darker turn. In 1992, Tyson was sentenced to prison, a place where the noise of fame couldn't reach him anymore. The cell door closed, and with it, the illusions of control he had clung to for so long. In that confined space, something unexpected happened. Humility. Tyson read constantly, studying philosophy, history, and religion. He trained alone in a bleak yard, fists pounding the air with regret and self-reflection. "Prison saved my life," he said years later, knowing it slowed him down before he destroyed himself completely. After serving 3 years, he walked out to a world still obsessed with him, but the man inside had changed. His comeback was explosive, violent, and financially massive. Quick knockouts returned, and the crowds roared like they once had. But something was wrong. The discipline was gone. The spiritual anchor Cus once provided had vanished. And in 1997, during the rematch with Evander Holyfield, Tyson's unraveling reached a horrifying peak. Frustrated, overwhelmed, and drowning in chaos, he bit Holyfield's ear in one of the most infamous moments in sports history. The disqualification that followed wasn't just a punishment, it was a mirror held up to a man losing control. The world mocked him. Headlines tore him apart, and Tyson, already battling addiction, grief, and betrayal, spiraled even further. "I was bankrupt in my mind long before I was bankrupt in my bank account," he would later confess, after losing nearly everything he had earned. Yet buried under the ashes of scandal and downfall was the faintest spark of rebirth. In the 2000s, a different Mike Tyson began to emerge. Softer, slower, honest in a way the world had never seen. He spoke openly about trauma, addiction, childhood abandonment, and the pain he had spent years hiding behind violence. He apologized to enemies. He cried in interviews. He admitted his failures without excuses. And for the first time, people didn't laugh at him. They listened. They saw the wounded boy behind the fighter. They saw a man trying, desperately, to stop running from himself. In the years that followed, Tyson transformed in ways no one could have predicted. He embraced fatherhood. He found love. He raised pigeons again, just like the lonely boy on the Brownsville rooftops. He practiced meditation. He learned softness, patience, and peace. The man who had once terrified entire divisions now sat calmly on podcasts, smiling shyly as he talked about healing. He spoke not of power, but of humility, not of violence, but of inner peace. And he finally understood something Cuss tried to teach him decades earlier. Conquering others means nothing if you cannot conquer yourself. Today, at 59, Mike Tyson lives not as Iron Mike the Destroyer, but as a man who survived his own darkness. He carries his scars openly, without shame. He acknowledges his faults, his addictions, his grief, and the mistakes that nearly ruined him. And through all of it, he found something far more valuable than belts or fame. He found peace. The peace of a man who spent a lifetime fighting the world, only to learn that the real battle was always inside him. Tyson's story is not simply a tale of violence or glory. It is the story of a broken child who became a warrior who became a legend, and a legend who finally learned how to be human again.